The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And if you would like to find out about the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for the programming on the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV, visit www.simultv.com. You know, X Zone Nation, when we think of getting towards the end of the summer, you know, we're just 2 days away from August. And to me, that is a sure sign that fall's right around the corner. And with fall, we start thinking about Halloween. Halloween makes us think of bloodsuckers and things that go bump in the night. But the truth is vampires are real, and many of them are sucking the life right out of us right this minute. We've talked about psychic vampires before. It is a reality, and here to further talk to us about psychic vampires and emotional vampires is Michelle Nagel. Her website is www.isoulshift.com. And Michelle, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you began to help people to better understand emotional vampires.
Well, I am the best-selling author of a book called Suffering is Optional, Step Out of Darkness into the Light. Mm-hmm. And I have had a lot of wide and varied experiences in my life, and most of them are as a result of trauma that I experienced as a child. And so my Cinderella story is that, you know, things were really bad when I was a child. Mm-hmm. I learned how to overcome all that trauma. And then I got my happily ever after. And then I lost it all again and had to start all over again. So along the way, I've run into a lot of individuals who just kind of sucked the life out of me. And I couldn't really figure out why until I discovered that it's, you know, some people feed off of other people's energy. It's how they get their energy. And it's not a healthy thing, but it's a very interesting process to watch. And so I began studying that. And I've had some really, really interesting things come to light regarding emotional vampires that most people don't know.
Oh, can you share them with us?
Sure. So when you think of an emotional vampire, most people think about think about somebody that you go and maybe it's a family member, or maybe it's the clerk down the street, or maybe it's somebody at your office that you work with, that when you interact with them, by the time you're done interacting with them, you're just exhausted and you feel like a limp noodle. And you feel like they've just sucked everything out of you and you have nothing left to give. So you kind of crawl back to your space and try to pump yourself back up again. And those people have been termed as emotional vampires. But the interesting thing is an emotional vampire is not who you think they are. because the reason that that person sucks so much life out of you is because there's something that you're bringing to the relationship. So when we start looking at emotional vampires, we live in a world where everybody wants to point fingers and nobody wants to accept responsibility for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. And so we point our finger and we go, that person just sucks the life out of me. When in reality, it's our interaction with that person that is the problem. So we have to, if you want to look at emotional vampire, you're having a problem with that, go stand in front of your mirror. Yeah. You'll see them.
In order to stop somebody from being an emotional vampire, isn't it up to the person who's getting the energy or the emotion sucked right out of them to say, hey, enough is enough. I'm not going to let this happen.
Yes, of course it is. Yeah. And it's this responsibility of the individual who's feeling that way. If you just take time to look at it, it's like, okay, this person triggers me. What is there in me that is being triggered? So I've actually know some people who have accused me of being an emotional vampire, which I find really kind of amusing because they didn't even know the term before they knew me. And it's really interesting to watch my interpersonal relationship with them. It's not healthy, and it isn't me, it's them, but I'm the one who is labeled as the emotional vampire. So it's very interesting to watch.
Is there a difference between emotional vampirism and emotional abuse?
Yes, there is. It has to do with intent. I am, because I grew up as an abused individual, I am very, very, very strong when I say if you are in an abusive relationship, you need to terminate that relationship. But the difference between an abusive relationship and one where you feel that you're working with an emotional vampire is that person willing to work with you to make changes so that the relationship will work better? Or are they not? If they're not, then of course you have to take the steps to do whatever you need to do to limit your exposure to that person. But if in reality, they would love to know if there was a problem, if you would just open your mouth and say, this doesn't work for me. Because I don't know, are you a mind reader? I failed mind reading. And so I don't do really well if people don't say, this doesn't work for me. Can we work on this and change it?
Yeah, I'm the kind of guy who says, hey, get out of my life. You're not worth it. You know, I don't put up with people who I find that are draining in any aspect, whether it's emotionally or whether it's mentally. I have very low tolerance for that. I will first of all say, hey, listen, I'm really not interested. It's not doing me any good, and I'm sure it's not doing you any good. And if the person continues, that's why I sever the relationship.
But do you ever consider that maybe you didn't get across to them what it is that you need?
Well, I give them that warning shot across their bow in no uncertain language. And if they still don't pick it up because they have a need to be heard, they feel that they are being the target of everything that is going wrong in the world, instead of taking them responsibility and saying, hey, you know, what's really going on here? I really can't put up with those kind of people, especially in my type of business.
Yes, I agree. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that we live in a disposable society.
Yes, we do.
You know, we throw away diapers, we throw away plastic bottles, we throw away people. And people aren't disposable.
At times they are. At times they have to be.
Only if they are not willing to work with you. If you clearly let somebody know that there's a problem and you would like to work on the problem, then it deserves to be worked on. I mean, give the person a chance.
I agree, but we have to establish whether or not the relationship is worth working on.
That's true. I agree.
Yeah.
We have to have boundaries.
We have to do also a lot of soul searching. And, you know, I can usually sum up a person within the first 5 minutes I meet them. And at the end of 5 minutes, I know whether or not this person and I can continue in a working relationship, a friendship relationship. Of course, these have to be nurtured over years. It's not going to become the great kumbayas right away. However, you're right. This is a disposable society. Things move fast. Decisions are made very fast these days. And time is of the essence. And I don't know very many people who are in business who take who have the time to play nurse to a lot of people. It's either you work within our realms where we can communicate with each other, we can be positive towards each other, or I'm sorry, this isn't going to work. The very best of luck to you. Goodbye.
I agree in a business relationship. Yeah. I think probably what I'm trying to get at is mostly that families, people in your family they deserve a little bit more time than the relationship that you're talking about, which you're right. In the business world, it is very fast paced and you do have to stay on top of it. But in the relationship realm of families,
that's totally different. There's no such thing as a disposable person in the family.
Right. And that's what I was referring to. But I agree completely with you. In the business world, you have to just kind of assess people and assess whether or not they are going to help you achieve your goals, move you forward, if there's going to be able to be a compatible relationship. If somebody's going to give you a bunch of tremendous drama, then, there's plenty of people out there that you can work better with.
You see, I'm very lucky. The people that I work with here in our companies have worked with us for years and years and years. In fact, my producer, Craig, has been with me for the last 28 years.
Marvelous.
You know, because we're a team. We grow together. We learn together. And we bring others into the team that we believe will fit well, and once again, making each and every one of us stronger. We've got to take our first commercial break. We'll be back. Don't go away, X-Zone Nation. Our guest this hour is Michelle Nagel, and her website is isoulshift.com, and she is the author of Suffering is Optional, Step Out of the Darkness into the Light. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. Don't go away. Michelle Nagel is our special guest this hour. X-Zone Nation, www.isoulshift.com. And Michelle, in my book, family, you do everything you can when it comes to family to do whatever it takes in order to make the situation right, to bring everything into a harmonious relationship. I was trained as a police officer where split-seconds decisions had to be made. And I've been able to successfully incorporate that into my broadcasting career and my career as an executive and owner of a company. But when it comes to family, totally different. Totally different. So how can we tell, or what are some of the characteristics that an emotional vampire may show but may not register with us because they are family?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for your service as a police officer. I know that I appreciate very much that you laid your life on the line every day for people. Thank you very much. So sometimes if we get in patterns, when we're born into a family, depending on what our birth order is, we kind of accept roles as to what it is we're going to do in our family. So in my family, I was the baby for a few years before my father remarried and had another slew of children. And as the baby, my older siblings thought I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I, quote, got away with everything. My older sister ended up having to be mom for a while because that was her job. She was the oldest, so she had to take care of us during that time period where my father was not married to anybody. And my my middle brothers, I had two brothers in the middle, and one of them was very obedient, and the other one was like total. He was just a rabble rouser. Any trouble that he could get into, he would. He just kept the household hopping all the time. And so, but we accept these psychological roles. Like there's oftentimes somebody who is the caregiver, which would have been my older sister. And I was always the peacemaker because I didn't want anybody to be angry or upset. And I would do anything to allow peace in the family. So in the case of an emotional vampire, what I was trying to do is I was trying to appease the older people in the family so that I wouldn't get abused, so I wouldn't get hit. So if I could make them happy, if I could, if I could turn myself inside out somehow so that I would be either invisible or that I would make them happy, and then I would be safe. And that is a way to totally suck the life out of me. That's how I felt, is like I didn't have any life left at the end of the day because I was in survival mode. I was just trying to survive.
Let me ask you that. Let me ask you this: the survival mode, was this you were doing all this to survive from parents, the abuse from parents, or the abuse from siblings?
I had both.
Wow.
My father sexually abused me. My stepmother physically and sexually abused me, and my brothers physically abused me, and my neighbors sexually abused me. So I pretty much had a charming childhood. So it was for me, being invisible was a really important thing. If I made myself small and kept myself invisible, then I would be safe. Yeah. And so in many cases, I would do whatever it took at the cost of my own happiness and my own sense of self in order to appease those other people. And in times that ends up being, I would say that was definitely a vampire kind of relationship.
Right.
And as I've said, if you are in an abusive relationship, absolutely do everything that you can to no longer be in that relationship. So when I got old enough, I left home and didn't see my father again for the rest of his life, or my stepmother. And that was a separation that I needed to make in order for my personal safety.
Is it easier for children today who are in either a physical or sexually abusive situation to get help?
I believe so, yes. Because while we still have people who are dumb as rocks and think that kids make these things up, it's more obvious because we talk about it more. Yes. When I was a child, you didn't talk about it. It was, my father was the pillar of our town. He had a very high position, very visible position in town. You do not say horrible things about your father or this wonderful man. And yet those things really did happen. While it is true that kids today have more resources than I did, that doesn't take away the fact that we still shame people into not talking about what happens to them.
It's been my experience in law enforcement that children lie a lot less than adults do. A lot less. They have less to gain by lying than adults do.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yeah. And my daughter, when she was on the bus as a 6-year-old, was assaulted by another student. And I called Child Protective Services to report it. And the lady said, "Are you sure she didn't just make it up?"
Oh, my goodness.
And I wanted, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm talking to Child Protective Services, aren't I? And I just wanted to go down to her office and just throttle her, because why would she make that up?
Exactly. So here you were calling the agency that you're supposed to go to for help, and you were neglected. Your daughter was basically called a liar without anybody doing any investigation. That's a crime. That's a shame.
Yes, I agree. It was really pretty awful.
It is.
And I never stopped making noise about it, and I reported her because you just don't do that. No. I mean, what if my daughter had been the one to make the phone call and say, "I need help"?
That's right.
It's just, you don't do that to people. And I've discovered that is validating what has happened to somebody who's gone through a terrible and abusive situation is really important. There's a woman that I worked with who was in her 70s, and she told me of an abusive experience that happened when she was a child. She was 10 years old, so she'd lived with this for 60 years. And I listened to her story, and she told me all about it. And all I said to her was, I am so sorry. That must have been such a difficult, horrible experience that you had. And she broke down and cried.
Gosh.
And she said that all of the counselors that she had gone to in her entire lifetime had always said, suck it up, Buttercup. There are so many people who've had it worse than you have. And my position is yeah, there are other people who've had really bad things happen to them, but I'm talking to the individual themselves.
Right. That's right. What's wrong with society?
I don't know. I can't answer that one.
No, that is just, all I can say is I'm sorry for what you have gone through. I'm sorry for the way that you were treated by the social service agency that is supposed to be there to protect you. And I'm so sorry for that lady who nobody, if you'll excuse my expression, appeared to give a damn about. Everything that happens to a person, whether small or large, is very significant to that person, and it should not be just foo-fooed.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I think a lot of things going on in the world would be better if we just validated one another. Everybody wants to be seen and heard.
Yes.
We show them that respect, and we say, I see you, and I hear you, and I feel for you, and we have this heart connection with them, then we can heal so many tragic things that have happened if we just listen to people.
And if we were to, I look back at the olden days where when you went to school, all the guys had to wear white shirts, all the guys had to wear the same colored tie, gray flannels, and black shoes in order to get rid of any competition. And the girls had to wear a similar dress code. Why kids today carry the iPhones around when they really don't need to? Why there's all this electronic bullying that has been born because of social networking and the mannerisms in which kids are able to freely communicate their thoughts. It's doing more damage than it is good, and it seems that nobody has the courage when it comes to the school system and when it comes to dealing with this problem to say, hey, put it down, leave it there. You come to school to learn, not to chat, not to do Google, not to do any of the crazy stuff that kids are being able and allowed to do today because there is no more structure within the scholastic school system. We need to take the reins back. Gosh, our teachers used to wear shirts and ties. You called them Mr. or Miss Campbell. It wasn't this first name stuff that our kids are able to get away with today.
Yes, I think, the pendulum has swung a little too far.
Yes.
Because back in that time period, there were too many things that were hidden.
Yes.
And so now in order to bring them into view, we've swung so far the other direction. And, the bullying, the cyberbullying that you're talking about is a way to be an emotional vampire online inconspicuously.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Michelle Nagel. Her website is www.isoulshift.com. And Michelle and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Just when you think you've heard it all, Exo Nation, comes up a little story that sends everybody flying. For example, the front cover of the X Chronicles newspaper, this coming edition that is going to be released on Thursday online. Do you remember when America landed on the moon? Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and we all watched the TV where Neil Armstrong was coming down the ladder. You know, one giant step for man and the rest of it. Well, Buzz Aldrin, the second man who allegedly walked on the moon, is now saying, we didn't go there. And I had to stop and listen to what he said again. I'm saying, all right, maybe he didn't go to the Quickie Mart. Maybe he didn't go to Walmart. Maybe he didn't go home to see his wife after bowling. No, the question was about the moon, the lunar landing. And he said, point blank, we didn't go there. To make a long story short, it was all because of money. It was to save face. This is according to Buzz Aldrin. I'm not making this up, and if you want to read the entire interview, as well as listen to the interview and watch it on the interview that we received the information from, it's going to be in this edition of the X Chronicles newspaper at www.xchroniclesnewspaper.com. Michelle Nagel is our special guest, and her website is isoulshift.com. And I think one of the biggest vampire-sucking creatures ever to be invented is the news. You just listen to the news and there's so much negativity. I used to watch a certain channel, and I will not name CNN. And all it is negative, 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 negative. Now, when I get up in the morning and I'm having my coffee at 5 o'clock to get to the office here for 6, I turn on the comedy channel. I start my day off with a laugh. And we had in our green room and in our newsroom the feeds from all the different news networks. And I went around one day and I said, you can watch this channel, you can watch this channel, you can watch this channel, but this, and this channel, no more. And we had it blocked because it was too negative. It wasn't news reporting. It was propaganda reporting. And I could see the difference in my staff. Like, they would listen to a story and they say, oh my God, did you hear that? Or what the hell's going on in the world? How come people don't relate what we watch on TV, what we listen to on the radio, and what we watch on social media and social networks as emotional vampiring as well?
I have no idea why they can't make that connection, because it's been proven scientifically. And I shouldn't say that because I can't pull up a study for you to listen to, but
I believe you.
Okay. If you listen to an individual, I mean, if you have children, if you've raised children, you know that when they watch a really, really bouncy or violent, perhaps, movie, their behavior goes downhill.
Sure.
And we have so many like copycat crimes that take place because somebody got the idea from a movie that they watched.
Yeah.
And we do just bombard ourselves constantly with the news constantly. And it does suck your energy away from you. But we're afraid to turn it off because we don't want to miss out on something.
Yeah, I remember, I can name you a perfect example. One of my nephews, his dad loved watching wrestling. That was until the son got a hold of the daughter and started choking her like they do on TV. Well, that was the end of watching wrestling in that household. Yeah.
Yeah, you do have a tendency to begin patterning your own behavior after what you watch constantly. So like even the sitcoms where they started out with being smart-mouthed to your parents. Yeah. Now kids are all smart-mouthed to their parents, and it's just the way it is. And it doesn't make for a peaceful family relationship to have people being smart-mouthed with each other all the time, or especially the destruction of the family as far as the respect that are shown to men. It became almost like men became open season, and I would see advertisements for cars that implied that the man wasn't smart enough to put the key in the in the ignition.
Yes.
And so dissing men became open season. We all had such a wonderful time with it. And I have been able to observe the decline in our society because we don't have respect for each other anymore.
That is so true. That is so true.
Yeah, and so there was the pendulum again. You know, there was the society that kept the women completely under their thumb, which was not good. Yeah. And so women broke loose, and then they have to just totally poop all over the men. That isn't necessary. Why can't we be nice to each other? So and the vampires of the constantly turn the news off like you did. I really think that's really amazing that you had the courage to just like turn it all off in your studios. Yeah. Because it does make a difference. And you're not going to miss out on anything. I don't personally watch the news, and I always know what's going on because I hear it somewhere. Or, you know, I come across it as I'm passing something in a grocery store. I can look at it just long enough to read the headline. That's it. I know it.
Now, you see, I don't shut off all the news. There are certain channels that I shut off, or else I had shut off, because they were too slanted. They weren't doing what I consider to be professional journalism. Journalism with integrity, because a journalist who has integrity, or a network that has integrity, does not slant one side or the other. They stay neutral and, you know, report. So once again, I refuse to mention the network that was the first one to go, being CNN. But there's other ones like Bloomberg, BNN, and others that are credible, that report the news.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Something else that I would like to ask you about, because we're talking about vampires, we're talking about how negativity can, you know, is spawned and you know, literally sucks the life out of people. What about with what's going on in the church these days, with all the different charges that are now coming forth about clergy, even nuns, and the higher-ups within the church that have been abusive to children and other adults for years and years and years. And finally, thank the good Lord, it's all coming out in the wash.
Yes, and it's a tragedy that it's taken so long to come out, because it has been going on for centuries. And that kind of, you know, that kind of trust, I'm not sure that it was trust, because I think it was driven by fear, that you respect these nuns or these priests and you don't ever say anything about what they do. But when a child is abused, they don't think they have any options. Yeah. This is an adult. This is somebody who has authority over them. This is somebody who can, as far as the child is concerned, can either, you know, make their life or take their life. And so they are in a constant state of fear. And then put on top of that the threat that if you tell anybody, you'll burn in hell. You know, then that affects their spiritual and their eternal soul. Now what? I mean, how do you talk about something that happened in that kind of a situation? And it's, I can't tell you the thoughts that go through my head when they discover that another priest has done something to children, and then they just move him to another parish so that he can continue to do that to other children. But at least he's not hurting those anymore. It just, you know, there's it.
I think they should move him to another planet.
Yes. Yes. Well, the mafia have some rather interesting ways to deal with people who are, what do they call them? Stool pigeons. Yes. They used to cut off their nether parts and stick them in their mouth. And sometimes that's what I think is like tie them to a tree, cut off their nether parts and stick them in their mouth. So I feel rather violent, I'm afraid, when it comes to somebody. Is
it that you feel violent, or that you feel totally, what's the right word here? Totally psychologically raped, that this could actually happen to a child in today's society?
Well, I think in my case, because it's already happened to me, it does elicit violence in me. I don't do anything about it because I do have myself under control. But there is that initial rage that comes up that's almost uncontrollable. It's like, whoa, and then I have to get a handle on myself. It's like, we'll let the law enforcement take care of that. We're just not going to do that. But I think everybody who really truly values human life should feel outrage that something like this happens. And not only should feel outrage, but do something about it. Do whatever it takes to make sure that your precious child is protected. Do whatever it takes to have the conversation with the child is what happened at school today. You know, teach them what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And it doesn't matter. Like, I know that one of my children, when they were very small, they came with me into an exam, and the doctor was doing a breast exam.
All right, we're going to have to hold it here because I have to take my final break. Michelle, please stand by. XZonation, Michelle Nagel is our special guest. Her website is www.isoulshift.com. And Michelle and I will return on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. XZonation, our guest this hour is Michelle Nagel. Her website is isoulshift.com. That's the alphabet isoulshift.com. First of all, Michelle, I want to thank you ever so much for coming on the show and for sharing and opening up to us and for helping us get a better understanding from your perspective. And I'm sure that tonight you've opened up a lot of people's hearts. And I'm sure that not only tonight, but everyone who's read your book and the other shows that you've been on, you've made a difference to people. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you.
What's the truth about toxic relationships?
The truth about toxic relationships is the mere labeling them as toxic is a toxic thing to do. So when you say, I can't be with you because our relationship is toxic.
Right.
You have just created a horrible thing of toxicity. I mean, you just spilled it all over the place.
Wow.
So the mere labeling of a relationship as toxic is, you have to look at yourself. Look in the mirror and go, am I the vampire? Am I the one that's got the problem? Because if you are going to judge somebody else as being a toxic individual, you really need to take a cold, hard look at yourself first to see if it's really not you that is the problem.
But isn't that a natural thing that a person does? I believe the psychological term is deflection. We deflect instead of accepting, and because nobody wants to admit they're wrong.
Of course not. Yeah. But you know, everybody keeps looking and chasing for this happiness thing, happily ever after. Where do you get it? Where does it come from? It comes from you accepting 100% responsibility of your life.
Bingo.
So if you've got something that happens to you, like things happen to people all the time, you can't control the thing that happens to you. So if somebody says that you draw this to you, I don't buy that. I only believe that I can have responsibility for what I do with what has happened to me. What kind of a person am I going to be? What kind of decisions am I going to make? What kind of actions am I going to take? What things are going to come out of my mouth? That's the only thing I have any control over, is my behavior and my actions. And the way I choose to look at some trauma that may have happened in my life is where I'm going to find happiness. If I choose to say, well, that really stinks, what can I learn from this? Or, wow, I really do need to make that change in myself so that I can get along better with other people, then that's where I'm going to find happiness. It comes from within. The shift is within. It is not out there.
What would you say to someone who has suffered or experienced something that is truly terrible, that they had no part or any control within the event happening?
First of all, I would validate that it happened to them.
Okay.
And that it was a horrible, horrible experience for them. Mm-hmm. And then I would ask them, what are you going to do now? What steps are you going to take in order to accept responsibility for how you respond? Don't react, respond. And the difference between reacting and responding is reacting is a knee-jerk kind of thing, and response is a deep breath, a thought, and then an action. And so that's all we have to do really is just take a pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and then go, oh, okay, how am I going to deal with this? That puts us in the driver's seat instead of having all of these things happen to us like a chain reaction because we reacted.
In your opinion, what is the one most important habit anyone should develop in order to find true happiness?
That would be 100% accountability. Look at yourself, look at your life, and figure out if you're not happy, then why not? It's you. It's not everybody else. We're not a victim society. Mm-hmm. And if you want to stop being the victim, then you need to accept that 100% responsibility for yourself.
How would we best relate this information to our children in order for them to better understand and have the ability to cope with these situations that will ultimately face them in their lives?
We need to teach them to breathe into the heart. If we really, when we learn how to get back in our body, we spend all our time up in our head thinking. If we get back in our body, everything that's important in life comes from the heart, not the head. And so if you feel in your heart, where do I go from here? What do I do now? So when a child has maybe a negative interaction with a school teacher or a child at school, then take them into their heart. What does your heart tell you is right? What does your heart tell you to do? And your heart won't lead you astray. Your heart knows what's best for you.
I agree, but you know, children can be so darn mean to each other.
Yeah, they can.
That I'm sure that no matter how you try as a mom or I try as a dad and a granddad, you know, sure, they understand, but when push comes to shove, will they be able to react in the manner in which we have taught them to react, or will the negative influence of maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 people outweigh this? And how do we cope with this disaster that has happened in this little person's life that we love so dearly? How do we cope with this as a parent, and how do we help them as a child?
We cope with it by loving them and by forgiving. I mean, and I know that sounds very pat, you know, oh yeah, right, sure, we go ahead and forgive. Well, forgiveness is a process. You have to work through it. And the same as change is a process. You have to work through that too. But if you look at somebody as doing the very best that they can in order to get their needs met, even if it is those priests who are abusing their children, okay, I guess they think they need that, and they're perhaps doing the best that they can. You remove the child from the situation, and you love them, and you believe them, and you listen to them, and you let them talk on ad nauseum about everything, about how it felt, and then you kind of redirect them to...
But if that child doesn't see that this person is dealt with, and that the consequences for his action is well, we'll just move the priest to another parish, does that solve anything as far as the child is concerned, or does this cause a deeper wound that is going to be harder to deal with in the child's future?
Well, it's a choice. You get to choose whether or not you want it to destroy your life. And we all have that choice. We all get to choose, what we're going to, of the experiences that we have in our life. Are we going to let this be the one that destroys us, or are we going to try to find happiness? And it is a choice. And making choices and then being accountable for our choices, the choice and accountability, those two things are the most powerful gifts that we have. And if a person, I know people personally who have forgiven people who have done horrific things to them.
Right.
And they have forgiven them. And it's a matter of realizing that you holding a grudge against somebody else is not really going to hurt them. It will only hurt you. And so you have to look at your inside, and you have to forgive, and you have to love. And that's the only way that you can do it. And so we teach our children that. We teach our children to forgive and to love and to be a better person themselves, to, have empathy. Because whenever we experience something really negative in our lives, that gives us the power to be able to strengthen somebody else who may go through a similar experience. And we are a community. This world is a community. None of us can do it by ourselves.
In your opinion, will anyone ever live happily ever after?
Yes, if they choose to.
It's a matter of choice.
It is. It's an absolute choice.
If you had one thing to leave with our listeners tonight around the world, what would that be?
Again, the most powerful thing you have is choice. And when you're looking for change, look within yourself. Don't look out there. Look within, change your own heart, and then you'll know what you need to do to change anything around in your circumstances, because you are the most powerful person in your life.
Do you go out and talk to groups about this? And if so, what is their reaction throughout your presentation?
I do go out and talk about it. And people really, it resonates with a lot of them.
Yes,
sometimes they get mad when I tell them that, you've got to accept 100% responsibility for your life.
Yeah. Because
it's much more fun to blame everybody else, and it's easier that way too. But the people who really get it, mm-hmm. It does make a tremendous difference in their lives. And the people who don't get it, maybe they'll get it later. Maybe it's something that will kind of percolate in their brain and come up later, and they'll go, oh yeah, I remember that. Maybe I do need to try that.
Michelle, do you have any new books coming out soon, I hope?
I am working on a new one. It's called Women Who Roar Win. And ROAR stands for resilience, optimism, accountability, and resourcefulness.
Well, when it is published, please let us know. We'd love to have you back on. This has been a very touching hour, and once again, I thank you very much for joining us. Let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can buy your book.
My book can be purchased on Amazon, and you can find out more about me by going to my website at isoulshift.com.
Michelle, I want to thank you again. Take care of yourself, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Good night now. X Zone Nation, once again, Michelle Nagel has been our guest, and her website is isoulshift.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break. For those of you who are listening to us on the X Zone Broadcast Network and watching us on iTunes, I'm sorry, not on iTunes. You can listen to us on iTunes. But for those of you who are watching us on the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.